Hello everyone, welcome to this SoundBridge tutorial on RitMix. Now first thing you see when you open RitMix is this main pads window. And the first thing I would do when opening RitMix, I would just stretch it out. It's completely vector based, it's completely resizable, so any size screen you have, you can completely cover that with your drum machine in order to play it easier with these MPC style pads that you have in this pads view. Filling this up with samples is easy. You can just drag samples in from a browser. You can drag it also in from a normal Windows-based browser and just populate these pads with samples of your liking. Let's say this is enough for the demo. Now you can play these just by hitting them. Now you can also layer these. Let's say I wanted to trigger both of these hats at the same time without having to actually click on both of them at the same time or punch them with my fingers on a multi-touch screen. I could just link them up as such. Now they are linked. Whichever one I press will play both of them, will trigger both of them. Now this is really useful when performing live. Now, amongst other things you have in RitMix right here is you can solo a certain pad, you can mute certain pads, you can delete a certain pad, and you can of course bring up the load dialog for a certain pad as such. Let's bring something into there so it doesn't remain empty. Okay, now unlinking these, just pressing the link, unlinked, done. I can link more than 2 pads, of course. I can link 3 or 4 of these at the same time, as such. Now they are unlinked again. Another thing, I can actually lock these. Now, once they are locked, you cannot load samples onto them. You can't solo them. You can't mute them. You can't delete them. This is most useful for performing live because, as you remember, the MPC doesn't have any of these small buttons underneath any of these pads. So if you wanted to perform live, imagine pressing either of these buttons while trying to bang out that complex beat. And this is going to help immensely. So you just lock them without any fear. Now you can just trigger the pads and that's it. Nothing else. Now let's see about editing more of the positions of these pads. Let's say if I wanted to switch up the places of these 2 kick drums and they would still have the same trigger from within our MIDI controller. Their MIDI trigger would stay the same, but if I wanted to switch places of these 2, just click this, and then since this kick drum is already selected, whatever I select next will switch places with it. So I can do it again with the tom. Bring it back again. So there is always at least 1 pad selected in RitMix. Whichever one is selected at the moment will be the one that is exchanged with the next one you select. As such. Of course, I can also duplicate these pads. Now I have kick 1, positions 1 and 9. Now, before we get into all these playback modes and clearing solo mute, let me show you another great functionality of RitMix. Now you can see these 16 pads, and well, for many of musicians that would be enough for percussion, but since you can use drum machines in various other purposes like samplers to play regular instruments from, you have more than just 16 pads. By clicking the sample banks button, it will toggle through 17 to 32, 33 to 48, and 49 to 64. So altogether, we have actually 64 pads in 4 views. Now let's get into playback modes. And these are fairly simple. Trigger mode just triggers the sample once. But if you switch it into a loop mode, it will just repeat that sample over and over. So it will loop the current sample, meaning that you could actually import loops and just trigger them and leave them playing, and then jam right next to them. This symbol right here allows you to re-trigger and stop the previous playing sample from the same pad, meaning that in this polyphonic mode, kick drum could be triggered and then another one of those again triggered on top of that one. So they would both be playing at some period of time together. Now if I have this engaged, the first kick played, if I played another one on top of it, would actually be stopped for the next one to be played. And of course we have the reverse button. Now if we soloed a lot of these for some reason and we just wanted to unsolo all of them, we can just press this button. Same with muting. We could unmute and unsolo multiples of pads. And of course, once we get to the sequencer, I will show you the recording of a sequence using this button. Now let's go over some more of the basic functionalities we have in RitMix. Now this upper section where we have all these buttons are navigation buttons, of course. Menu serves to save a kit, load a kit, or initialize one. If we initialize this one, it will undo everything we've made so far, destroy all our hard work. The kits button will present you with the pre-made kits that came with RitMix. Now you can add to these kits from your own by pressing the plus. Of course, you have to save your kit first to add it to this list. You can load any of these kits, you can replace any of these kits, and you can remove any of these kits in this quick access menu. Pads view we already talked about extensively. You have the edit window, which lets you edit any of the samples in any of the pads to a great extent. You have the sequencer, you have your mixer, and you have your effects panel. Now, aside of that, we have this BPM section, and I would just like to get over that quickly. Now, this is the BPM for the beat that would be playing if we made something in our sequencer using these samples. If we sync to host, the BPM is automatically taken from the DAW that RitMix was loaded in, so it would also be 128 BPM. Now, if not synced to host, and we wanted to, let's say, synchronize our sequencer playing beat in RitMix with any outside source we have, let's say we're jamming with friends that already are playing a song, we could actually nudge this BPM up and down. Well, if you press it shortly, then it's a slight nudge, but if you hold it, it moves more rapidly away from the main BPM, up and down, of course. This is going to help you to synchronize with the outside source if you have anything playing from your sequencer in RitMix. Now, this is the standard nudge functionality. You can find this in Ableton, let's say. So if you want to sync with Ableton, you could. If you wanted to sync with Tractor, you could. With any outside source of music, even with live performance. You can, of course, guess the beat by tapping the BPM of the song playing next to you that you can hear. Just tap the beat and RitMix is going to guess what BPM that is.